Giant stalker, dragon stalker, crypt stalker, demon stalker, rift stalker, grown stalker, crypt stalker, scourge stalker, wind runner. I'm a bone elite skill hunter, a death dealer, a life stealer. That's just the cost of being.
Welcome to episode 196 of the Hunting Party Podcast. I'm Arth from the Warcraft Hunters Union.
And I'm Darkbrew from thebrewhall.com and the Brewhall on Twitter.
And I'm Alexander from the Hunting Party Podcast.
And today is Saturday, November the 30th, 2013. If you want to participate in the chat room and have your name mangled on the air, which is what we do, just kind of create a cool huntery name and join in on all the fun. And you can ask us questions and ask Roger Brown, our guest, questions. And there you go.
Yep. Speaking of mangling huntering names, today we are joined by Alderanya, BM Jaeger, Cab, Dan Duratiki, Alapide, Galeso, Gobao, Induates, Joima, Lakey, Ligerwolf, Liriana, Mib, some letters, Mib, some other letters, Morgatho, Primoc, Rapine, Roger Brown, who we're going to introduce here in a second a little bit more fully, Roy, Ruckariu, Slugslinger, The Tubbs, and Zudamus. Let's see, our lovely moderator, as always, is Ali Sonder. You can send your questions into Ali in a private message by left-clicking her name in the chat window there, selecting PM and typing in the new tab. Or, if you're not listening live and you'd like to have your question answered perhaps on a future show, send your questions into huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com, and we'll try to get to them at some point down the line. All right. Well, hello. I've only been with a working mic for about 30 seconds, so welcome back, Dark.
Yeah, thanks. It is good to be back. I actually did listen to episodes 194 and 195, so I got caught up on that. Wish I could have been part of that, but
Good. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. It was we did all right in your absence. I was a little worried that first week, but everything went smoothly. And then, of course, last week with Michelle Morrow, she's always a blast.
Yeah,
so.
that was a good show. So I'd love to respond to some of those things, but I'll save that for next week because we've got a great show planned for today.
Yes,
one quick note: a couple people reported issues with the iTunes feed for episode 195, saying it was pointing to 194. They were correct. I fixed that last night, so fear not. If you get our podcast via iTunes, you can now get episode 195 as you should.
Yes, and thank you for pointing that out. Sometimes we don't catch these things right away, so it's good to know that off the bat so we can get it fixed quickly. And thanks again to Synth Kenny IRL, who helped out by putting everything up online after the shows were up, doing the editing and putting them up on iTunes and YouTube and everywhere else. So he did a great job with a really quick turnaround these last couple weeks getting the show up there once we were finished with it. So thanks again to him.
Yeah, thanks for making me look bad and putting a lot of pressure on me now to get these things out as soon as we're done speaking. That was pretty amazing. So
Yeah, he did a great job there. So joining us today is the famed hunter Roger Brown of the guild Method. Now, Method is one of the premier raiding guilds in the entire world of Warcraft. They have achieved, am I reading this correctly, all the 25-man world firsts in Mists of Pandaria for each tier of content?
We'll let Roger answer that, but I believe they were pretty much number one for each tier, basically finishing everything before everybody else.
Yeah, welcome to the show, Roger.
Yeah, welcome back,
Hello,
Roger.
Everyone. It's really good to be back. It's the third time I'm on the show, and I'm really excited. And yes, this is correct. On the 25-man rates, we have been world first on all the tiers up to in this expansion.
So yeah. So it's not an embellishment to say that Method has been the premier raiding guild, 25-man raiding guild in Mists of Pandaria, period. So that's and this is you're the primary hunter for Method. So we're going to get to talk to him about a lot of different things with the current raid, the raid tier, and also things that are upcoming in Warlords of Draenor. So if you have any questions specific for Roger Brown, please submit those, and we'll try to get to them later on in the show. Before we jump into that, though, we do have a couple news announcements. The first is that Ghostcrawler is leaving Blizzard. So we covered this on the WHU. I think I just put it up yesterday, but the news broke on Wednesday or Thursday this week, and he's leaving for, quote, another opportunity. We don't know what that is yet, but he was very very appreciative on his way out, and saying what a great community that WoW has. Even the people that complain that it's better to have people that are interested in the game and its changes and making it work, rather than having apathetic fans. So taking the good with the bad, he said that it was an amazing community, and it's really meant a lot to him.
Yeah, I take this as a sign to mean that hunters must be just absolutely perfect at this point heading into Warlords of Draenor, and therefore there's nothing left for him to do. Now, I mean, and you were at BlizzCon, Roger, did you ever a chance to meet Ghostcrawler, or have you guys interacted with him at all in some of the testing and things that you've done with the raid content?
Yeah, I did get to meet him when we had the Blizzard tour in their offices. Just briefly though, like we were just passing along and we happened to meet him there. Didn't really have a chance to talk to him personally, but I did have the opportunity to talk with Chad, who is known on Twitter now as Celestalon. I don't know if you've seen him, who apparently is the guy to send him tweets and message him if you think that your class is underpowered. So I did get to meet that guy, and it was pretty fun. We talked a little bit about the hunters. Awesome,
yeah. I never got to meet or talk to Ghostcrawler, but I know Frostheim did back when he was going to BlizzCons, and they would chat occasionally about hunters, and there were a couple of specific areas of concern for hunters that Frostheim brought up that Ghostcrawler listened and responded, and they eventually happened. So, and one was concerning defense capping pets. This was during the transition from Wrath of the Lich King to Cataclysm, where we had been using PvP gear to defense cap our pets, and that wasn't going to be possible anymore. And they introduced the talent after. And this was very, Frostheim brought this up, and Ghostcrawler said, "Oh my God, I had no idea that this was happening. I didn't even think of that. Let's get this fixed." And then they put that talent in where pets can be defense capped again, which we still have to this day. So for soloing, for pet tanking, for things like that, it was a huge deal. It was something where he directly responded to someone in the hunter community that that we all know with Frostheim. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I'm sure there are many other stories like that too. So I mean, it wasn't all good, and there was a lot of fan feedback that maybe wasn't all happy puppies and roses, but I think for the most part, Ghostcrawler really cared about the game and and the fans and what we had to say.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. I mean, Frost, I don't want to say he established a friendship, but they certainly established sort of an acquaintance. And I mean, they would exchange emails from time to time. Every now and then, Frost would say, "Oh, I heard from Ghostcrawler," and he'd give us some little bit of information that we would not allowed to speak about because it wasn't ready for public knowledge. But and that was always fun. I enjoyed that. Of course, Frost got him to record a little bumper for the show back when we used to take breaks, and we would insert that into there. He had Ghostcrawler saying, we love Hunting Party Podcast, and we gem for strength, and he got him to participate in the whole Boomdiata video. So it's very, very, very cool. I mean, we were never able, or never really tried even to get Ghostcrawler on the show, but love him or hate him, I mean, I think he was the face of Blizzard in this game for many, many years, and I think ultimately we're going to miss him.
Yeah, well, we'll get to see who comes up next, who we get to yell at. So, but yeah, the other news, just very briefly here, the WoW movie release has been pushed back. I think it was going to be sort of end of the year 2014, and now it's going to be March 16th, 2015. So, which is an odd date for like a big movie release. Usually, like May starts the big blockbuster films, but we'll see. This is all still sort of in development, but for now it has been pushed back. And lastly, and most horribly, a Warlock has soloed Immersis 10-man normal. So let's just move on from that unfortunate.
Yeah, I know. So if you wonder what we've been complaining about Warlocks the last few weeks for this tier, just saying that we think they're a little bit overpowered. I don't know what your experience has been with them, Roger, but then we see that one has now found a way to solo 10-man Immersis. So that says it all.
I would say their soloing capabilities are pretty much in line with their DPS capabilities in the raids as well. They have been absolutely destroying us on the meters this year.
Yeah, so you heard it from one of the best guilds in the world. Warlocks are OP. They need nerfed into the ground.
Now that said, do you I mean, how many do you carry in your team? Do you go out of your way to stack as many as you can, or is that really not something? They're not something you would do.
We used 4 Warlocks, and we pretty much used them for every single boss that we progressed this year around. So yeah, no one was sitting on the bench, pretty much. I guess that's, yeah, you basically used as many as you could.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I think we've at least heard some anecdotal evidence of higher level guilds doing that as well with how good Warlocks have been. But it's interesting to hear it firsthand. So, yeah, I think they have been a little bit overpowered relative to other classes. Hopefully Blizzard's aware of that. It's not the worst thing in the world, especially if you're able to bring a lot of Warlocks in your group, but it's certainly in relation to Hunters, that's, not the best thing. So, yeah, nerf Warlocks.
Now, you got to attend BlizzCon this year. How was that for you? I mean, what did you get to do there?
I think that was the best trip of my life so far, including the whole trip. And at BlizzCon, definitely the highlight was the live raid, where you get to see so many people actually watching you play this game, which you're just used to play in your home where no one is watching too much.
Yeah.
So that was pretty crazy, I must admit.
Yeah. Now, is it harder to play? Are there more nerves involved when you know so many people are watching you? Because I would probably have a hard time playing to the best of my ability, knowing that there's thousands and thousands of people watching me raid. Did it change your play style at all, or were there any nerves involved, or was it just sort of business as usual?
Initially, the plan was that they would actually show the points of views of some players, including mine, but they didn't end up doing that. They just showed like a point of view from a developer. They had like a cool UI set up for that. So I think that was a good step, because if everyone was actually watching my personal point of view, maybe I would feel like really stressed to do any mistake there. But other than that, I think it's not only that a lot of people are watching you, it's mostly that because it's so time pressured and you need to not, be the guy who wipes the raid, that's the pressure that you have because of the race, not so much because of the people. And you could see that in the DPS meters specifically, because usually we have a lot more DPS than what we had there. And I think it's because people are just playing it way safer. They don't push the DPS too much because, they want to make sure that they kill the bombs, the mines on the Siegecrafter, for example. They focus on that and not DPSing the boss so much. So, yeah, it does have an impact on your performance for sure.
Huh.
Were you guys
know?
Okay.
Did you know how good the other team was doing?
Yeah, like me personally, I did know, because the setup that we had there was like we had the laptops in front of us where we played, and then underneath the stage, like in front of us, there were huge screens where you could see the point of view that everyone else was watching, like the point of view from developers that the developers were showing. So I could sometimes, throw a glance there and see that, okay, they're wiping. Good, let's keep going. So I did know where they were, yeah.
And the way they set this up, I mean, it was Siege of Orgrimmar bosses. They chose how many was it? 5 different bosses in the raid that they had you go through. I mean, it wasn't like you wouldn't do the raid like you normally did, so there was no trash or anything like that. Was my understanding correct?
Yeah, because it was so time pressured, we only had 1 hour for this, and before the next panel was about to start. So they decided to do 5 bosses, get a good mix of the whole raid instance. And yeah, you had no trash. As soon as you killed the boss, you got teleported to the next one, and you were ready to pull instantly.
Right, and the group was it that you were going against? Now they struggled on. Was it the shamans? Was that the first boss?
Yes.
Yeah. So they got stuck right off the bat.
It was the second boss.
The second boss. Excuse me.
Yeah. The first boss was South Pride. They did end up killing it slightly faster than us because we went with an extra healer compared to them. So they killed it like 10 seconds faster than us, and you could hear the crowd just going absolutely insane. That was kind of scary, like when you hear everyone cheering and you know that it's for the other team, you're like, oh, what's going on here? Need to step up. And then we ended up having trouble because we swapped some players in for the next boss, and they had trouble actually with the loading screen, so we had to wait almost like 20 seconds for the last guy to zone in before we pulled. So they were way ahead than us, way ahead. And they pulled the boss, and they did a different tactic than what we did. They went for the, not the safest tactic, basically. They went for the more DPS and more risk-involved tactic. And in the end, it didn't pay off for them. Thank God. So,
right.
yeah.
So you guys got through that relatively quickly and then moved on. So you were basically on Garrosh, which was the final encounter, while they were still stuck at Shaman. So they were like 3 bosses behind you for a while.
Yeah.
And then
the thing was that we pulled Garrosh, we wiped fast once, and then I see that they are still at the on the Dark Shaman encounter. I'm like, okay, just keep calm, we can do it. It's easy. We are way ahead. But then when we wiped the second time, they had already killed it, and they were catching up on us. And by the time that we ended up finishing the race, they were actually on Garrosh, and they had already wiped once. So it's pretty fast how they caught up to us after they killed the Dark Shamans. But yeah, we knew that we were way ahead, so we took our time, waiting for trinkets, make sure that the phase 1 DPS was as high as it could be, and yeah.
So let's talk about the Garrosh just a little bit, because obviously going into this, you'd already cleared this, and presumably you have all these bosses on farm in Heroic, but yet they're still challenging enough where, I assume the Garrosh fight, there's little room for error. So, given that you wiped a couple of times, was that just because of the time pressure and the environment, or is it really just that difficult an encounter and it doesn't take much to kind of set things going in a bad direction?
Yeah, the first wipe was kind of like just really bad at the start. We decided to wipe it actually. We could have combat res the 3 people that had already died, but we decided just wipe it because it's not worth it continuing with so many deaths. And it was just a case of we overestimated our DPS. We tried to. Then we saw that we were doing less DPS, so we had to push the boss to enter the next phase, and it all got messed up in the process. So we said, yeah, never mind, we're way ahead. Just wipe it now and go fresh and go strong. Let's say the next step. And the second time, the hardest phase of this boss is the 3rd phase actually, which doesn't last long, but everything happens at the same time, and you have to handle the mind controls. And you have to handle the ads as well. So when that happens, unfortunately for us, we had a tank death as well at that exact same time. And then because there was so much chaos going on, the mind controls went out of control pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And if you fall behind on the mind controls, it's over. You need to either handle them fast or they're done.
Now, in normal mode, that 3rd phase, what you're talking about, is actually the final phase in normal, correct?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And so I know what you're talking about. I'm sure a lot of people do, but that is I understand it's sort of there's a real time pressure there, and like you said, the mind controls are the big things, and like if you fall behind on that, then you're finished.
And the difference with normal mode is that you actually need to finish that phase with at least 20 people alive, because you have another phase going on. In normal mode, you can sometimes just say, okay, let's just nuke the boss, kill him.
Right.
Rather, we are 5 people left at the end. So.
If anyone's interested, a little while ago when you guys first killed Garrosh, I posted methods kill on the WHU. I posted the video, and for being a world first, we can't say anything negative about it. But you didn't finish with too many people alive, and I think it was just 1 person, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, there was 1 person alive, and everyone went. The best part of the whole video was right at the end when everyone's getting the achievement and making the kill, and you just hear all 25 people go nuts. You're just all like screaming and yelling and stuff, and there's literally 1 person still alive. That I thought that was awesome. It was the coolest looking kill in the world. Now, since then, I've seen cleaner kills with a lot more people alive at the end, but of course that was the very first one. So it was incredible to see.
Right. So you see, what happened actually was, when we got the kill, before that, we had a really, really good try, like an hour and a half before that. We had a try where we brought the boss, I think, to like 1% or 0.7%, and it was a very clean try. we just had a misplay at the end where you can wipe pretty fast on the last phase as well. It's easy, but if someone is out of position and they get a certain debuff and they're not next to anyone else, then the boss just does 500k damage to everyone instantly and they die. So that's what happened there. But that would be a much cleaner kill. So we were all bummed out, like, how did we wipe? Oh my god. And then we have our tank, one of our 2 tanks, he disconnects after that try. It's actually the guy who stayed alive from the actual kill, the last guy alive. So he disconnects for 2 hours. We're waiting for him.
Wow.
We're like, what is going on? What are we going to do? Because there's no way we can replace him.
Right.
So we're waiting there until his internet is back up. And then he comes back online. We're like, okay, let's do this. We know it's possible. And then we go, and that try where we actually killed it was kind of a bad try overall. That's why you see in the end it's so close. It's pretty much a method kill. I don't know. We always do these kinds of kills. Every tier we have a couple of those.
So let me ask you about that kill then. So I don't know, at that point in time, do you know how many other guilds were working on Garrosh at that time? Were you the only ones, or were there others that you were competing with?
There were some guilds who had killed Paragons of Flaxseed before we killed Garrosh. I'm not sure how many. I think it was at least 2 or 3 on the 25 months in. There was definitely Blood Legion, which was our main concern. And then I think also Envy had killed it, and as well Exorcus, the Russian guild.
Yeah, I remember Blood Legion's video was actually up just prior to yours. You guys killed them first, but so it couldn't have been too much after you guys that they killed Garrosh as well. So there had to have been at least a couple other guilds that were right there.
Yeah, we killed. The thing is that we thought we were quite ahead, which we kind of were. The video was because we had to edit it a lot, and that's why it took us a bit of time. Doesn't really reflect the situation back then. But we killed the Paragons of Flaxseed the week before, and we had a good 2 days, I think, of practice on Garrosh before the reset. And then after the reset, we killed again Paragons of Flaxseed before anyone else did it. So we killed it 2 times before anyone else.
Oh, wow.
And then we were again for like 1 day or something on Garrosh, and then that's when Blood Legion killed it, and they were with us. I think we could have had a faster progress if we went for the easier tactic, which I'm sure you've seen in many other kills, which is to kite the ads instead of killing them, actually. But we just said, we're method, we always try to do the hard way, the hard mode tactic. It's pretty much the same as Ragnaros. I'm not sure if you remember that. That
yes.
Where we were one of the guilds who killed the ads single targeted. Everyone had his personal ad, which he was killing, instead of AoEing them all, as almost every other guild did that tactic. Yeah.
So in that night, so you're waiting for your tank to come back for 2 hours. I mean, are you guys stressed and worried that some other guild is maybe will get the kill at that point, or are you just sort of more worried that hey, this is not how we want to end our raid night here?
Yeah, I think we were very stressed in the terms that because of some of our raiders actually work, we couldn't start the raid the next day early. So we would have to wait until like 7 or 8 p.m. to start our raid, which I'm sure for you is like the normal thing, but for us, it's not. We start the raids way earlier than that usually during progress. So we were a bit stressed. I think it was just a personal thing, like we wanted to kill the boss. It wasn't so much that we were so afraid of other guilds, because we knew we had like a good 2 or 3 days of progress on that boss, more than any other guild. And we had steady progress. We didn't really get stuck on something too much. So we were pretty confident that we were ahead. It was just, like, come on, we just had a 0.7% try in a 30-minute boss or whatever.
We've all had that feeling, although probably not on a world first kill. So we've all had that feeling of, come on, we're right there, where you get them under 1%. I'm thinking of 1 or 2 bosses in particular where that happened to groups that I was with, and it was incredibly frustrating. I can't imagine it when the stakes are that high.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great video. So it is up on the WHU. If you do a search for like Method or Garrosh World First on the WHU, I'm sure it'll pop up in the search. And it's a really fun kill to watch. And I think it pops to it jumps around to different screens, and I think it pops to your screen a few times.
Yep.
So yeah, you can see a little bit of Roger's point of view on the Garrosh World First kill. So. Now, let's see. Well, we talked about you were at BlizzCon, so of course the biggest news out of that, outside of your involvement with the live raid, the biggest thing was the announcement of Warlords of Draenor and everything coming out with that. What are your thoughts in general about Warlords of Draenor, either in general with the game or specific to hunters?
For hunters, let's start from that. For hunters specifically, I was kind of disappointed that there was no class panel this year. I was really looking forward because I'm not sure, you can correct me on this, but haven't they promised us a rework in the whole class, kind of similar like the Warlock one or something?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I've heard sort of conflicting things. At one point, we thought that certainly spec differentiation was something that they wanted to take a look at. But on the other hand, I've heard that they talked recently too that don't expect big class changes, generally speaking. So
I think the tune changed at some point, because you're right, Roger. I remember hearing something like that too.
Okay, yeah, like that's my biggest disappointment. That for hunters specifically, the only thing that we got to see was the level 100 talent. That's pretty much it, right? I didn't see any other change.
That's correct. Yeah, there were some minor things where they talked about changing the weapon sounds. We're going to get overhaul, but that's cosmetic.
To be fair, like most of what any class is seen is just their level 100 talents. So there might still be some other changes that we haven't heard about just yet, because most of the news that we got at BlizzCon was general news about the game itself, about Warlords of Draenor. We didn't get a whole lot of class-specific news, and to this point, the only big news that we have about really any of the classes is the level 100 talent. So we might still see a little bit of a rework, like you were talking about, although we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, that's my point. Like, the only panel which I would be really, really interested in would be that one. I don't really care about if there's a what's it called? The garrison, right? Where you
right.
I honestly, the only thing I want from the garrison is for them to allow me to disenchant my epic gear so I can actually make some big cash when the expansion hits when I'm upgrading my gear. Because it's so annoying. You see all these enchanters in the guild posting their side crystals or whatever they're going to be called on the auction house for thousands of golds, and you're just selling it to a vendor for 20 gold. It's so unfair. So that's what I want from the garrison. But in general, that's what I wanted to see. Like class changes, what is new. Oh, right, we saw also the heat and expertise removal and reforging as well. So I guess that's kind of the news for the whole.
Yeah, they announced some gear changes, which affects everybody. Obviously, we only wear mail and agility, so having the primary stat switch from strength to intellect, doesn't affect us whatsoever. We could, that's a nice quality of life change for those hybrid classes, but for us, that's not something that matters. I mean,
I think it's just a nice way so that you don't disenchant, for example, elemental or Resto Shaman gear.
Yep.
You can use that gear yourself now. So if your guild doesn't have many shamans, then you profit from that change. Anyways, going back to the hunters, I think that the level 100 talents are pretty cool. I like them. I like how they change your playstyle. Not directly, but yeah. The thing I didn't like was that you weren't allowed to actually try them, because they gave you an account level 90, so you didn't get to try the talents actually.
Oh, so they didn't give you a level 100 tune to kind of play around with. I see.
You just saw the talent tree basically. That's it.
Right. I've said this before. I think the talents are very interesting. I like them. I like that they don't give us another button that we have to press, and particularly the one with the pets. there's a lot of interesting stuff that they can do there. I wonder if and we've wondered openly what's going to happen to pet buffs if we don't have our pet out in the other specs in like survival or marksman, but because especially in 10-mans, like in a 25-man it's probably not as big a deal, but in 10-mans a lot of times you're relying on one or more pet buffs. So outside of that, I really enjoy all of the talents, and I think they're going to be cool. There's the one that makes you stay in place, but it's probably going to be a pretty big DPS buff, the snipe ability. So I know anyone who's raided regularly before Mists of Pandaria is familiar with having to manage their movement. At first, it was a long time ago you had to like manage your movement in between auto shots, and then they got rid of that. And then it was for stationary shots like steady shot, and then they got rid of that too. And we were aspect dancing. And in Mists of Pandaria, basically, we just didn't have to worry about movement. So I actually like that they're bringing that back a little bit.
I like that a lot as well. I think it's really nice that they tell you that, if you're a good player and you can manage your movement, then here, you benefit DPS-wise. I think that's a good step towards making the class actually balanced in terms of DPS, because right now everyone can do maximum DPS pretty much while running around like a headless chicken. It's so easy. So if you put things like that, then you can bump the DPS as well, so you can actually see yourself in the damage meter without scrolling down. The thing I want to say about the pet listing, which you said, I didn't think about the buff actually, because in a 25-man raid you don't really care about those. I guess it will affect guilds who are 10-man. Then again, they make the mythic raids 20-man, so I don't know. I guess they should allow you somehow to get a buff extra.
Yeah, we're hoping that they do, but nothing's come out yet. We don't know for sure, because especially for 10-mans, that could hurt hunters with that talent.
Yeah, and it's not just the buffs. I mean, I think there are other talents too that you might take that rely on having a pet, glyphs and talents that are pet based as well. So if you take that one talent, I don't know.
Right. So how are you going to do Master Scroll, for example?
Yeah.
Without a pet?
Right. Exactly. So there's some stuff they have to work out, but I think there's a lot of potential, especially with that talent, if they do it right.
I think just a small note that for the pet listing, I think it's a good talent, specifically for some bosses, where you get some damage buffs, right? Because you get them, but your pet doesn't. So in a lot of cases, you would have I don't know, for example, let's say on the Protectors in tier 14, where you get that buff if you do the hard mode or whatever, where you kill those ads and you get the stacks, but your pet doesn't get those. So I think if you go without a pet, then you're benefiting 100% from it instead of 80%. Those kinds of buffs.
That's a great point. So that certain fights where you have buffs or debuffs like that, it might benefit to take that talent because you're getting a bigger boost than you would with your pet out. I hadn't actually thought of that, but that's an interesting take on that talent with specific fights in mind, because you mentioned a couple recent fights, but there have been a lot of fights like that in the past where that's been a common struggle with hunters, is that a lot of times pets don't inherit the same buffs. This has been true since probably BC, that we've been complaining about this. So yeah, that's interesting. Now it gives us this extra option for fights like that to maybe maximize our DPS.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. Hopefully the beta won't be too far away here, but it'd be nice to kind of see more information specifically about what they plan to do for the classes and specifically for our class. But why don't we talk?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with the other talents as well, because as I told you, I did have a brief talk with the developer there, who was working with Ghostcrawler basically, and I told him, what about the talent tree? I think it's the 5th talent tree, where you have the Murder of Crows, and the other 2 talents. So I told him that this is not a nice talent tree there. It's not. The choices are not nice. I don't like them at all. And I think he told me that he wasn't sure, but Murder of Crows might be getting removed completely in the next expansion.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. Because honestly, I think it doesn't really make much sense. What they put there, if it's below 20%, it becomes like a kill shot, basically, like, okay, it's a 1 minute cooldown, but many times the boss dies before 1 minute is over as well. So I don't know. I just think it's kind of clunky.
Yeah, I agree. That was always sort of the problem, and you had to kind of gauge whether or not you were going to get the full duration of the ability while the boss was under 20%, and if you weren't, you know, it didn't make sense to necessarily wait for that just to, you know, or whatever with the ads and things. So I agree with you. It's a cool looking ability, no question about it. I mean, it was just kind of neat to see the crows descend upon your target, but like I said, mechanically it was a little bit clunky. But well, why don't we do this? Why don't we switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the talents and things, and with the current stuff that we have, and we'll see what they present us for the expansion. But you've written a guide for hunters, and you've updated it for 5.4. So why don't we talk a little bit about some of the specs you run with and talents and things like that, and get some idea of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm actually posting the links in the chat room as well. There's two that Roger's done. One is the Hunter Guide, and it's updated for 5.4. There's a lot of cool information in it. It rehashes a lot of things that raiding hunters will already know, but there might be one or two things in there for you to pick up, and certainly if you're getting into raiding or if you're just a casual player, there's a lot of good information in that. And there's also we talked about looking in on Roger's screen during that world first kill. So he's got a very informative but still very streamlined UI, and he's got a tutorial, not a tutorial, but a list of what he uses for his UI, including pictures and scans and things like that. So if you're interested in that at all, it might give you some ideas for mods, add-ons that you might be interested in, or ways to play. So I have those posted in the chat room.
Well, regarding your UI, correct me if I'm wrong, Raj, you actually give instructions on how to install it and configure it the way you've done it.
Yeah, basically, a lot of people have been asking me before I made these instructions, basically step by step, what you need to do to actually copy the UI exactly as it looks. Many people would come to me and say, yeah, this doesn't work, how do you do it? And then it's really tiresome for me to explain every step for every guy who asks me. So I just make a TXT file where I say, okay, you do this, and then you're done. You know, everything is copied, looks exactly as it does in the screenshot, and then you can configure it afterwards however you like. Yeah.
Yep. So it includes all the add-ons that you have, all the settings that you do, the way you've configured those add-ons, and I believe you also include your macros as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. There are macros. Also, my keybinds are there. If you do a command, you can copy all my keybinds, so even the bars look exactly the same. So yeah, it's pretty much all you can get.
Yeah, the Hunter Guide really covers a lot of ground. There's talents, glyphs, stat priorities, best in slot gear, reforging tips. There's consumables and information on different professions, and then you have stuff on your opening rotation. People are always asking about opening rotations, and especially back when we had readiness, there might not have been a single best way to do it. There was 100. You could ask 100 different hunters and get 100 different opening rotations, but you could do worse than copying the opening rotation of one of the better raiding hunters out there, who's raiding with method and getting all these world first kills. So and then there's a bunch of macros too. Maybe not a bunch, but a few useful ones that you've used on occasion. So there's a lot of good information there, I think, and some stuff that as much as I've rated and I've written guides on some of this stuff, I'm still looking at some of this and going, oh yeah, okay, maybe I'll try that out. There's information for any hunter in here to sort of look at and maybe incorporate into their own game.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that what I'm writing in this guide is 100% correct. Like I don't have the theory crafting mind of I'm not a genius with theory crafting and all of that. It's just what I use, what I think is working, and you might not necessarily get the maximum DPS by following this guide, but it's definitely a way to help your guild kill the bosses, and not so much about padding the meters and getting those World of Log parses and all of that.
Right. Right.
Specifically, I've been getting a lot of questions. I'm not sure if you've encountered this. so many people come on my stream and ask me, why don't you use Thrill of the Hand? Why do you use Fervor? And I tell them that, yeah, maybe on the simulation craft or whatever tool you're using, it says that Thrill of the Hand is better, but for my personal experience, it's much more useful to use Fervor as survival, okay? As survival, and it's much more fluid. It's just 10 times better in my head than using Thrill of the Hand. But I'm not saying that people who use Thrill of the Hand are necessarily doing worse than me. It's just my personal opinion.
Right. Well, what we've seen more and more with these, because Blizzard wants to give us choices, and if something is so much better than the others, it's not really a choice. So with some of these, maybe there is a best choice, but a lot of them are so close that you're never actually going to see it except in theory crafting, because it's all within RNG. So so whatever you're most comfortable with. So like you're here saying, Fervor makes 10 times more sense to you and you're more comfortable using it. That to me means you should be using Fervor. And if Fervor makes more sense to you and it works better with what you're doing, absolutely start using it. Maybe someone isn't as comfortable using Fervor, they don't feel like they're getting a lot of benefit out of it, or they don't find good ways to work it into the rotation, then that's not a talent for them. Mm-hmm. So the biggest advice is probably do whatever you're best at, and we've had that advice for specs as well. Even if one is supposedly doing the best DPS, and usually there is one that we can point to and say, "Yep, here's your best DPS spec." If you are personally better in another one, that's usually what you should be playing. But if you're willing to jump around and try different ones, go with whichever one is most comfortable to you. Unless you're comfortable with all of them, then go ahead and follow the theory crafting.
Yeah, that's very correct as well. Because right now, at least, also another question which I've been getting a lot is, why don't you play BM? Why do you play survival, this boss, that boss, And I just tell them that, yeah, both specs are really good. Maybe there are some specific fights where, okay, one of the two shines a lot more than the others. But if you're really good at one spec, you're not forced to go and play the other spec just because, It's... You play with what you're most comfortable at, and you'll probably do better playing that.
Yeah, there's a couple people in the chat room saying that Fervor is very underrated, so we have some hunters agreeing with you here.
Well, and I think part of the reasoning behind Thrill of the Hunt has to do with the two-piece tier set bonus and the fact that arcane shots help reduce the cooldown of rapid fire. And so by having Thrill of the Hunt, you can get off more arcane shots, I guess, and cost less focus. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Does that seem like a reasonable thing, or you just prefer Fervor?
I think that's why a lot of people actually have valued Thrill of the Hand this tier a lot higher than the other talents. They think that the synergy there is just insane, and that's why they try to use it. But in my personal experience, with Fervor, you basically get 100 focus out of it, which is essentially 3.3 arcane shots out of it, if you want to go the percentage. So I think it's obviously less, you're going to do less arcane shots by using Fervor than Thrill of the Hand, but Fervor, you can use it so much better, for example, when you want to burst AoE, when you want to, you're completely out of focus and you just want to switch to something and do some damage instantly to it. So I think it's much more... it gives you much more flexibility, and it's also very, very reliable. Thrill of the Hand, you can be unlucky and it doesn't proc when you want it, and you're completely focused out and you're spamming the Cobra shots, where you could use it there. Or it goes the other way around. It keeps proccing and overlapping itself, so you're basically wasting your stacks.
Yes.
Whereas Fervor, every 30 seconds you use it, and yeah, that's it.
And do you just use it always on cooldown, or do you sometimes wait longer than that, depending on how your focus is doing?
Sometimes I might delay it. Yeah, if I'm over half or over 50 focus, I don't use it. I wait to drop an arcane shot first and then pop it, so that I'm not losing any focus out of it. Sometimes it gets kind of problematic when I use it, when I'm really low on focus, and then I get the lock and load proc right after, and I have the crazy luck where you do 10 explosive shots in a row with the 4-piece. So I do get focus capped. But in the same sense, you can get Thrill of the Hand procs when you have lock and load, and you're basically wasting them because you need to spam the explosive shot as a priority.
That's an interesting take, and so like I personally on multi-target fights for the multi-shot procs with Thrill of the Hunt really enjoy it, but for something like you're saying, and it has happened to me, as I'm sure it's happened to anyone who's had Thrill of the Hunt, where it'll not proc when you maybe would like it to, or it procs a bunch and you've got too much, you literally can't get rid of your focus. Whereas Fervor is something that you control personally, so that you're able to maximize it to your benefit. So that if you're able to do that, it's something where you can maybe help min-max your DPS a little bit more by controlling it specifically rather than counting on random procs. So in survival, I tend to prefer Thrill of the Hunt, but I absolutely see your point, especially when you're really getting into the nuance of getting every last bit of DPS out of your tune.
Yeah.
So do you do BM at all for any encounters, or are you strictly SV for everything?
I did play VM during progress on a few bosses. I can't recall which specifically, but I did play it. And I did play it a little bit afterwards, but the thing is, because I enjoy survival more, I really like when the 4-piece just keeps proccing and you're just spamming the explosive shots all day, whereas as VM, there's no randomness, right? You're just pressing the buttons. You're not expecting something to pop up and be all excited about it. Right. But yeah, I've played BM. I think it's just as good as survival on some bosses, especially, for example, on Garrosh in the first phase, where you get to do Bestial Wrath plus Beast Cleave and go crazy on those adds. And if you're one of those lucky guys to have a cooldown reduction trinket, then you have it every time the adds appear in phase 1, and your DPS just skyrockets. There's no way survival is doing that DPS. So I think it's an okay spec, but personally, I prefer survival.
Cool. And then look at some of the other talents. I know Post Haste is a fairly popular talent. You get which gives you the speed boost over when you disengage, versus say Crouching Tiger, which seems to be the two choices. And do you have a strong prep? Do you ever use Post Haste, or do you pretty much stick with Crouching Tiger for the deterrence?
Yeah,
cooldown?
I haven't really been using Post Haste, to be honest. I think, indeed, on some fights where you don't really need to use deterrence or anything, it obviously is better because you don't get any benefit from the Crouching Tiger event, like if you have to run really quick somewhere. But personally, I just leave it on the Crouching Tiger because that is more important on some specific fights. For example, Dark Shamans, right, where the other guys wipe on the race. If you have Crouching Tiger, you can deterrence a lot of the meteor explosions that happen after 50% of the boss, and you take like no damage from it. So it's really important to get as many deterrences there if you want to play it safe. Yeah, I just don't really. I haven't been bothered to try the other talent, but it could be useful for sure in some fights.
It's useful for, well, if you guys probably don't wipe so much, but after a wipe, I find Post Haste to be valuable if you have to run back a long distance.
That's true. I haven't thought of that.
But that's more of a travel bonus than any encounter benefits. And
see, for pros like RogerBrown, they don't ever wipe, so
Well, it's more like I just don't ever run. I just wait for it res, right?
Right. Yeah.
RogerBrown
awesome.
wipes when RogerBrown wants to wipe.
Right. And then what else? Oh, glyphs. The glyph of I know in the guide, I didn't see anything much written about the glyph of liberation. That was a relatively new glyph that gives us some healing every time you disengage. Is that something you use or don't see too much benefit to?
Initially I think it was really good, but then they reduced the amount of healing that it does. Or was it back in the start of Mr. Pandaria when they said it was actually a talent initially, and then they nerfed it and then they removed it completely?
Yeah, it was a talent in the beginning. You're correct. I don't know if it made it to live or if it was just in the beta, but yes, that was a talent at one point in time.
Right. So my thoughts on it are pretty much the same from back then. That I think it's really weird if you really need a heal that you're gonna disengage. It's most likely in a scenario where you're stacked up, you're taking massive damage, and disengaging out of any AoE heals, it doesn't really make much sense, not to mention that you might need your disengage later on. And because the heal is not that big, it's what, 10%, I think? Or what is it?
I think it's 5%, actually, yeah.
5%. So I think you're better off trying to get in range of more healers or popping a Hellstone than using that glyph just to disengage for no reason when the heal. I think it's more oriented as a PvP glyph where you disengage regardless, so you're getting some good healing out of it. I really prefer, obviously, the Animal Bond is a must-have, pretty much. I think everyone is using that. And the Deterrence one, which increases the damage reduction that you get out of it. Although, as I said again, yeah, I could see myself, for example, if I wanted to really play to the full potential of my class, to remove this glyph if there's a certain fight where Deterrence isn't useful, and maybe use that glyph instead. But I'm not, I don't bother with it so much. And the glyph which I really enjoy is the glyph of Disengage, which allows you to jump further away with your disengage. I really like that glyph, actually. Because, for example, you have a fight as Garrosh, where you have the 7 people moving out so that he throws the weapon towards them and not in the middle of the raid. And then you're disengaging back towards the boss after he throws the weapon. If you have this glyph, you can actually jump out of the AoE before you take a single hit. But if you don't, then you do take 1 tick. I know it's minor, but I'm just saying that it's cool. I like it.
There's a lot of cool uses for stuff like that. We talked with BRK, Big Red Kitty, a couple weeks, or probably 3 or 4 weeks ago now, who was a similarly huge fan of Disengage and being able to avoid damage in certain ways. There's a lot of different uses for it in fights, along with Deterrence. There's just a ton of different uses if you're creative for really maximizing your survivability and taking as little damage as possible and moving around to also help your DPS. So.
Well, why don't we move on to some we do have a few listener questions. Why don't we fire off some of those for folks? Alderana wants to know, Roger, what's your favorite pet skin? Do you have one? Is there a particular pet that you prefer? Or?
Okay, so I do have a pet which I think is just adorable. Okay, it's a bird, which is, you can find it. It's really specific. You can find it. What's the zone called? What's the zone the furthest to the north, with the whole ice and the mountains?
Stormreach?
The Kunlai Summit? Is it, the one of the Pandaria zones, or?
Yeah, where the Sagopan Monastery is. And stuff.
Yeah, the Kunlai Summit.
Kunlai, yeah, it's Kunlai. Right, I just brain freeze there for a sec. On the Kunlai, right, where there are the mountains with the whole ice, where you actually, you have that quest where you're climbing a rope or whatever. I guess many people might remember that. So there are these kind of birds there, which you can tame, and they look, well, I don't know the exact name. Let me really quick try to find it. But it's basically the pets which give the debuff for, it's the debuff that the tanks usually put on the targets that they hit. What is that?
Trying to think, is it the, let's see. And it's a flying bird, I take it, versus, say, like a tall strider or something like that?
It's a flying bird. It's just a bird. Wait.
While you guys are searching for that, I do want to point out, if you're not listening to the show live, the guides that we've been discussing, both Roger Brown's UI guide and also the Hunter guide that he posted, I'll be putting that up on the WHU this upcoming week. So for people in the chat room who maybe want to take a deeper look at that later on, or people who aren't listening live who aren't looking at the links in the chat room, they will be up on the Warcraft Hunters Union this week, and we'll have a little bit of a discussion on those as well. So I think there's a lot of good information in them, and also a lot of information coming out of this podcast that'll give me things to talk about for 2 or 3 articles this week. So expect to see that. You don't have to worry if you're not listening live.
Okay. It's a carrion bird. Okay, it's a carrion bird. That's the and it's called.
Yeah.
Okay, wait. Can I link from Petopia? A link.
Yeah, sure. You can go ahead. It should be able to do that, I believe.
Okay.
If not, we can do it. Yep, there you go. Oh, the Raven. Yes.
The Raven.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one that I have. And I think it's just amazing. That's my favorite skin.
Cool. Let's see what else. Premok has a question for you, Roger. He says, in the past that you've done some documentation on boss tips, specs, towns, glyphs, strats, etc. Do you have anything documented specifically for the Siege of Orgrimmar, or do you have any plans to do that? Any kind of boss strategies or hunter tips for any of these encounters?
Right. So back in Dragon Soul, actually, I did that. I had a guide specifically for each boss, a little, for hunters specifically, what small things you can do to help your raid, or cool ways to do some extra DPS. I haven't done that ever since. I'm not sure if I'll be doing this, to be honest, for this tier. Maybe I'll start doing it again for the next expansion, because right now I just finished updating my guide as well. I think it covers a lot of stuff. If there's something specific on a boss, I might say it during my stream or something, or you have really some trouble with a specific boss, you can just ask me, and I'll answer that part.
Yeah, there are, especially when you talk about talents, I think a few times you reference specific fights where you'll say, well, normally I take this, but on fights that are like this, I might take this other talent, and you'll name 1 or 2 fights in the current tier that are representative of that. So it's not necessarily a boss strat, but it'll give you some ideas of how you can play the different bosses a little bit differently with your specs, maybe with your spec, maybe your glyphs, and things like that. So there are other tips and tricks out there. We posted some on the WHU when 5.4 first dropped. So there are some other resources out there to help you. But yeah, I think there's a lot that gets covered in your guide, even if it's not specific to each boss, that you can sort of apply to a lot of the bosses.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we did have one other question. It says, this is from Keldul, former guest on the show. He's been on a couple of times. Hello, Keldul. And he says, do you think hunters should have a raid-wide cooldown like the other DPS classes do? And if so, what might it be?
Raid-wide cooldown.
Yeah, this might be putting you on the spot here. But I know he's talked about this. Now,
I'm personally not a huge fan of those, to be honest, in general, so I wouldn't like to see more classes having them, because you just get into a situation where you need to bring those classes just for those buffs. I guess you mean like a Skull Banner, right? This kind of raid cooldowns, or a Stormblast Torrent. Because you could really see the difference on some bosses where we replaced the warrior and we didn't have a Skull Banner at the start on the pool, but here is in every single cooldown in the world. So you kind of have to bring that class just for that buff. So I don't think I would like to see hunters getting that. I would like hunters to get other things, for example, like a proper defensive cooldown, which allows you to actually do something while you're using it instead of deterrence. Or, yeah, I don't know. Something to give us a bit more flexibility with our defensive capabilities. Yeah, and I would also, again, for the hunters, the thing I want to see is make the class harder to play, so that good players benefit more from playing the class properly, and don't make it so easy for everyone to do proper DPS, because then it's so the meters, the parses, the things that Blizzard is monitoring. Of course, you're going to see hunters high there because it's so easy to play it. No offense. I mean, I know that there are hunters.
Well, let me ask you this though. In sort of the history of the game, looking back at hunters as we've gone through each expansion, is there one sort of version of a hunter that you can point to that most I would say resembled that, or had those qualities, or have hunters never been in a state?
I really like my personal favorite tiers would probably be, as a hunter point of view, like how we were. would be probably Firelands. I really enjoyed there because also it was the last time I get to play Marksmanship, which I really, really miss. I hope they will make it a very good spec in Warlords of Draenor. Yeah, because there you still had, you know, your aspect dancing. You had to stand still to do some aim shots. You had to play a bit good in order to do good DPS.
Right.
And I also enjoyed the time back in ICC and Ulduar, because back then you had, as you mentioned before, you had to stop to throw the auto shots, and I really enjoyed that as well, maximizing that, you know, moving and then stopping for a half a second so the auto shot goes off and then continuing moving, and also trying to use, you know, your multi shots to hit 3 targets. That was a DPS increase as well.
Yeah.
Stuff like that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier, and about how the snipe ability is going to bring back the sort of movement management, and hopefully, I'm actually hoping that's the biggest DPS increase of the 3 talents, because I'd love for that to reintroduce movement management, which we really don't have at all right now with hunters. And I remember looking, it was back in, it must have been during like Trial of the Crusader, Ulduar, that area there, and watching videos of some of the better hunters in the world, and just marveling at how much they sort of their character looked very twitchy, but it was this real choreographed dance. So they got in each one of their auto shots. Now I don't necessarily want to see them bring back all of that, but there's something to be said for easy to play, hard to master. And we got to the point at one point in Mists of Pandaria where as long as you were kind of smashing some button, you were going to be close to your top DPS. You know, it didn't. There wasn't a whole lot you could do to separate yourselves for the great hunters to separate from the good hunters. Now, I'm not saying that I'm a great hunter or ever was. However, it was fun to be able to find things like that to do to really maximize my DPS, to help me separate in relative to other classes or even relative to other hunters. The whole idea of, you know, really getting into the minutia of the class was fun for me, and I think it is. I think it is for a lot of raiders as well. So I don't necessarily want to see all that brought back, but I think you have a good point that it's easier. The class is much easier to play well now than it used to be. So there isn't as much of a difference between the really skilled and dedicated hunters and just sort of your run of the mill casual players. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's nice when you put in that dedication and you can really see it on the meters, which we haven't been able to recently.
And from the point of view of my guild, where you obviously have the best players of all the classes, or one of the best, I guess. Let's not sound too cocky here. Then you get to a point where you just can't compete with the other classes, and I think that's the reason why. Because Blizzard is looking at logs and classes and how hunters compare to other classes. And yes, a normal hunter might do the same DPS as a normal warlock or a normal, I don't know, mage or something. I don't know exactly how the classes work, but just other classes, because it's much harder to play a warlock to the full potential than it is to play a hunter, I assume. I haven't played the warlock again. I don't know. So that means that the Blizzard cannot buff us a lot, because then there will be a lot of other classes saying, wait, how is the hunters doing so much DPS and it's so easy to play it as well? What's going on here? I'm busting my ass trying to maximize my warlock rotation, and I'm still behind him. So yeah, if they make the hunter class harder, then they fix that problem, and then they can allow us to actually see ourselves on the damage meter, at least in my guild, because it's kind of been like a joke in the guild that, yeah, the hunters are always quite low on the meter, unless, you know, you're full geared and it's a perfect fight for you, and you have the RNG god on your side.
Yeah. While we were discussing this here, your Rage stream also got posted in the chat room, and I'll be sure to post that on the WHU this upcoming week. So anyone who wants to visit that, you can either scroll up in the chat, or like I said, I'll make sure it gets posted on the Hunters Union later later on this week. Well, we're actually a little bit over time. We have plenty more we could talk about, but you want to say some of that for I'm good for a little bit of post-show. Before we do the official outro, we want to thank you for coming on the show. We're glad we could finally get you on, so it was nice to be able to chat today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me again, and sorry that it took so long to actually find the date.
Hey, no problem. I mean, one of your excuses is that you were doing a live raid at BlizzCon. So if that isn't a valid excuse for missing the podcast, I don't know what is. So don't worry about it.
That's something that only 50 people and who played the game got a chance to actually participate in. So that's a pretty good excuse.
As excuses go, that's probably the best one in existence. So
I just wanted to do a quick shout-out to Razer, our sponsor.
And with that, you have been listening to episode 196 of the Hunting Party Podcast. I'm Arth from the Warcraft Hunters Union.
And I am Darkbrew from thebrewhall.com and the Brewhall on Twitter.
And I'm Alessandra from the Hunting Party Podcast.
All right, check us out on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or add our RSS feed to your reader, and we'll have all these links available in our show notes.
Yep, including the many that got posted in the chat room today. And if you like us, please don't be shy about leaving us a review on iTunes or YouTube, especially one where you tell us how much Warlocks continue to need nerfed.
I want to be a Warlock. You can submit a title for this week's show by emailing us at huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com and have your name mangled on air by professionals. And actually, I have 5 Warlocks that I never play, so there.
I deleted mine a long time ago, just by the way. All right, stay thirsty, my friends, and remember to drink your dark brew lager.
We're the Horde.
Please nerf Warlocks so we don't lose Ali, and nerf Canada.
This is Ghostcrawler. You're listening to the Hunting Party Podcast, and I gem for strength.
Cheetah to dragon hawk, no time to waste, cause I can jump shot. BM, MM, and SB, I can rock out any tree. Never worried about my threat, cause I've got FD and misdirect. Catching loose mobs in my traps. I never miss, cause I am hit capped. Cause I'm the hunter, not the marked. I'm the fighter, not the spark. I'm the kiter, not the kite. I'll top meters every fight. Raiding endgame, dealing death. Just me, my gun, and my trusty bed. Now let's begin with Illidan, Osirian, and Gil'jadan, Magdamar, Asgalor, Gruul, Cthulhu, and Razorgore, Onyxia to Ragnaros. Which one have we killed the most? Kel'Thuzad to Malygos. We even killed Akama's ghost. Feels like we're getting close, all that running as a ghost. Yogg-Saron, Therian, Sartharian, Magtheridon, Saphiron, Luciferon to Sulfuron, Archivon, Amalon, Corellon, Algalon. The faction champions, the death toll rolling